Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to this lecture in the Information Systems series. This lecture is titled Blockchain, Some Advanced Concepts. In a previous lecture, we looked at this new exciting technology tool called a blockchain and its the power and the uses it can be put into and what exactly makes it so powerful and so useful. So we just touched the basics upon what a blockchain is and what it can do. In this lecture, we look at some of its advantages, disadvantages, and certain other features which make blockchain what it is and why it is such an exciting technology tool today. This lecture is being broadcast on Swayam Prabha Channel 16 in the series on information systems titled Blockchain Advanced Concepts. My name is Dr. Sudhendra Hanumantarao. I am the Dean, Faculty of Management and Commerce, Manipal University in Jaipur. Once again, this lecture is being broadcast on Swayam Prabha Channel 16. As I mentioned in a previous lecture, blockchain is an emerging technology. It's a technology tool and one of the most exciting tools to come by in one of the recent years. As far as 2016, the World Economic Forum declared it to be one of the top 10 emerging technologies. And let's briefly go over what a blockchain is, which was covered in the previous lecture. It's a ledger. It's the most common variety of blockchain. It's a distributed, tamper-proof or tamper-evident public ledger. It's distributed. Copies of it are with everybody who is participating in the blockchain mechanism. It's tamper-proof or tamper-evident. If somebody tries to tamper with a ledger, physical ledger can be tampered. Somebody can erase the transaction, write something new. In blockchain, even somebody tries to erase a transaction and write something new, that also gets recorded. So we can always see that it's trying to be tampered, it's been changed. And the most common varieties of blockchain are public. Everyone has access to the blockchain. They can look at it, they can verify, they can add transactions to it. It's based on three pillars of decentralization, consensus, and cryptography. Transactions as they happen are time-stamped so that at any point we should be able to go back and see when exactly a transaction happened. Blockchains are forward updating. That is, we cannot go back in the past and change data retrospectively. A blockchain is called a block because it consists of a chain of blocks in an encrypted form called a hash chain. You open a block, you can't see what is written. It's encrypted, uses gibberish. So it's called a type of encryption that uses is called a hash or hashing. And blockchain consists of a set of blocks in a chain of hashed blocks. And each block encodes one or more transactions. A blockchain can only have one chain, one continuous chain. It cannot have branches. When people try to add new and new blocks to the front of the chain, it's possible that two people try to add blocks simultaneously, making a branch. In such cases, only the longest valid chain prevails. The other chain gets discarded. Anyone can search, browse, and verify the block. That's the nature of a public blockchain. Anyone can search what's there in the blockchain, can browse, can verify. We can also add more blocks to the blockchain. The key power of blockchain is that we talked about intermediaries. Business happens between two parties because of a trusted intermediary. So these intermediaries come in various forms. The most common variety is what we see on a daily basis. When I buy an item from a vegetable vendor by giving him a currency note of 100 rupees, I don't know the vegetable vendor, he doesn't know me, but he trusts me because the middleman, the Reserve Bank of India, guarantees that the currency note I am giving him is genuine and he can always exchange it for the value of 100 rupees anywhere else. That's how business happens in the real world between any two parties. We don't need to know each other to do business, but there is a cost involved in running the trusted intermediary. It also sometimes makes the process slow. So blockchain's power comes by removing the intermediary from the picture. When two people interact in the web anywhere, we don't have to know each other, we don't have to trust each other, we trust the blockchain. Blockchain provides the trust by making things very transparent. We can always go and verify what's happened. Yeah, thus it removes the trusted middleman from the picture. It makes transactions cheaper, makes them faster, and as we see from the examples, this is what makes the blockchain very powerful. It removes any intermediaries, any trusted intermediaries, and brings the power of person-to-person transaction make possible. And in most cases of blockchains, some or all members can add new blocks, others can verify validity of blocks, and rules are always transparent. In every blockchain, under what conditions can we verify the transaction, under what condition we can put a transaction in a block, under what condition we can put a block onto the chain, are all well defined and applicable to everyone. Even though information is very open, it's very secure, and its integrity is achieved by integrity means only people who are allowed to authorized to make it change to the information are allowed to make it change. Nobody else can change the information. So security and integrity are achieved by this science called cryptography, which encrypts, which converts the text we type into a gibberish which nobody else can understand unless they are authorized to do so. And it uses a combination of two types of cryptography called hashing and PKI. And public blockchains, we'll see what they are. They maintain themselves by incentivizing the maintenance. So anybody can maintain a blockchain. And why do they maintain a blockchain? Because blockchain provides an incentive to do so. Thus, there is an economic foundation for running a public blockchain which maintains itself. There are different types of maintenance schemes called proof of work and proof of stake and various things. And there are about 4 common types of blockchains. There is a public, permissionless blockchain. This is classified based on ownership and the type of authentication required to access the blockchain. We have public, permissionless blockchains. It's open to everyone. Everyone can do all the activities allowed. There are private permission blockchain. The blockchain by various corporations, like the one with JP Morgan or Facebook, they are private, owned by them, managed by them. And to enter those blockchains, we need some kind of permission. The other combinations also are there: public, permission blockchain, and private, permissionless blockchain. For this, I gave the trivial example of a blockchain set up for my own family, for me to transact with members of my family, like me giving pocket money to my children and them recording in the blockchain what exactly they are spending the pocket money on. So right from a public corporation like JP Morgan or a completely public blockchain like Bitcoin, we can have blockchains going all the way up to individual families. Even there we can leverage blockchain. Silly as the example may sound. Let me take a brief break here. So that is what we saw in a previous lecture. The basics of what a blockchain is. It's a public ledger which can be which works under certain conditions, which can be maintained under certain conditions, and there are 4 varieties of them. And what are the advantages? Why is it so powerful? Why are we so excited about this new technology? What are the advantages? As with anything new, we need to be mindful of some of the disadvantages also. We also look at a couple of an additional concept within blockchain called a smart contract, which is what blockchain exists completely in the electronic world or in the cyber world, as we say. How do we link it to the real world? One way of linking it to the real world is through this additional concept called a smart contract. I briefly touched upon that in the previous lecture. In this lecture, we will look at more details of what a smart contract is. We will look at the most common example of blockchain, this cryptocurrencies. That's how the blockchain came into existence, and we'll look at one variety of them. So we'll also look at various tools that are available to develop and build a blockchain. We'll look at one variety. It's called a blockchain platform called Hyperledger, and we'll look at 1 or 2 more examples, time permitting. What we see here is a basic transaction in a blockchain. An example taken is of person A trying to send money to person B and how it happens on a blockchain. One thing to remember is that typically each transaction can be encoded as a block. In most blockchains, a bunch of transactions are joined together, a block is built, and that block is added to the blockchain. Though this example talks about each transaction going into a blockchain, each transaction actually goes into a block. The block, if it has sufficient number of transactions, get built into the blockchain. So let's start with step 1. Person A wants to send money to person B. We are assuming it's in the form of a cryptocurrency. The transaction is represented online as a block. Actually, it's represented as online as a transaction, which will be within a block. The transaction is broadcast to every party in the network. When I record, I tell everyone that I'm going to send 100 rupees to party B. And everyone on the blockchain, it could be any number, and it gets broadcast to all of them. Those in the network approve the transaction is valid. How is the transaction valid? First, number one, I should have that 100 rupees with me. If I want to give person B 100 rupees, I need to have that in my record. They verify my records and verify that I have 100 rupees in my account, and I have given permission to transfer that money to person B, and then they approve that. So that block or the transaction can then be added to the chain. What happens is the transaction gets added to the block, and after a certain time, block gets added to the chain, which provides an indelible and transparent record of transactions. And next, money moves from A to B. So when this transaction is complete at this point, what do we see? We see that person A transfers 100 rupees it puts its intent of transferring 100 rupees to person B. This transaction is verified by various parties within the blockchain, and a record which says that 100 rupees has been transferred to person B. Now the person's A's balance, which is also recorded on the blockchain, gets reduced by 100 rupees. Person B's account balance, which is also on the blockchain, gets increased by 100 rupees. So anyone at a future date, if now person B says that I have 100 rupees, I want to buy this item from you, any other party selling item to person B, person C, can go to the blockchain and say, yes, person B has 100 rupees, because there is a record of person A transferring that money to person B, and no record of person B having spent it. This is the basic transaction within a blockchain. So let's look at some of the advantages. One is the distributed consensus ensures trust inherently. It eliminates trusted central agencies. So in going back to this example, now that person B has 100 rupees, normally we give a currency note, we give a note or some online transfer which is guaranteed by a bank to any third party, person C. Suppose person B wants to buy a pizza from person C by giving 100 rupees. Now person C has to trust the Reserve Bank. If person B gives a 100 rupee note, person C trusts because we trust the trusted middleman. If person B gives a credit card, person C trusts the credit card company. The credit card company guarantees that this person B will pay you 100 rupees to deliver the pizza. Now let's see how the blockchain works in this field. The distributed consensus ensures trust inherently, eliminate trusted central agencies. Now assume that the whole transaction has happened on blockchain. Now I am person B, person C. Person B comes to me and says, I'll transfer 100 rupees to you, you send me the pizza. Now before I send the pizza, I need to ensure that person C, he has the money. I can always go to the blockchain, assuming that it's a public blockchain which I have access to. I can go to the blockchain and follow the trail of transactions and find out that indeed on such and such a day, person A transferred 100 rupees. It was a valid transaction approved by all the participants by consensus. And now that 100 rupees is in person B's account. So when I give the pizza to person B, I can be reasonably sure that he has the money to pay me. How exactly do we ensure that the actual payment happens? We will see that in a smart contract. But so far, I don't need to trust, I don't need a central bank, I don't need a credit card organization to tell me that person B does have 100 rupees in his account. So what has it done? A blockchain has ensured trust inherently. If account of person B shows 100 rupees, it's there because I can go and verify, and it has been verified by third parties too, various third parties. Thus, blockchain can eliminate trusted central agencies. While in the case of Reserve Bank, it's not necessarily a good idea, but most other trusted intermediaries like credit card companies, they can charge up to 2% of the transaction as their fee. So that dramatically reduces the cost of transaction. That's the advantage of eliminating trusted third parties. For example, if you are buying an item worth 1 lakh, 2% comes to 2,000 rupees. If you are buying an item worth 1 crore, 2% comes to 20,000 rupees. So the cost adds up. When it comes to 2 lakhs, my apologies. If I buy an item worth 1 crore, typically if I am buying a plot of land, might be worth rupees 1 crore, the fee of these agencies, third parties, comes to 2 lakhs. So this blockchain can dramatically reduce the cost of these transactions. There may still be a small cost by that specific blockchain to maintain itself, but nowhere near 2% and things like that. So I can always verify and eliminate a third party thanks to a blockchain, and that feature enables us to reduce the cost of transactions. And also most of the times blockchains also significantly reduce the time taken for the transaction. For the actual verification, in the case of credit card, in the case of a currency note, we inherently trust the central bank. In the case of a credit card, it may take a few seconds. But imagine buying a plot of land in which we have to verify the documents, or an international transaction where currency has to be converted. Today, such transactions may take up to a week. Such as some of the currency transfers from lesser popular currencies, from some smaller countries, to our currency may take up to a week. Somebody remits money in that small country, and that gets deposited to our account. It may take such a long period. Blockchains can almost make the transaction almost instantaneous. Such kind of transfers. And blockchains are distributed. Anybody who is part of the blockchain has a full copy of the database, full copy of the ledger, full copy of the blockchain. This makes it strongly immune to denial of service attack. In the e-world, in the internet commerce world, one of the easiest ways to bring down anything, destroy anything, is not just to attack the site, just close access to the site. Denial of service is called. Bombard, if too many people rush towards the door will collapse because it cannot handle so many people. That's exactly many times happens. When we open a website for transactions, somebody can incapacitate us not just by hacking us, by simply bombarding us with requests which will simply bring our system down. So such attacks are very common and called distributed denial of service attacks. There is also a distributed denial of service attack, DDoS. And since blockchains are distributed, somebody has to attack all the nodes simultaneously. All the places where blockchain is stored, attacking one node or one point with the blockchain doesn't bring down the blockchain. There are other nodes running the same blockchain. So it's strongly resistant to denial of service and those kinds of attacks. And blockchains can make sure that this transaction, which records that person B places an order to buy pizza from me, promising to pay me 100 rupees, and by means of smart contracts we can link it to the real world. We'll say how, so that when I actually deliver the pizza to person B, 100 rupees gets transferred. There are so many other advantages too. The public nature of blockchains, the fact that they cannot be easily tampered with, somebody cannot attack them. These are some of the additional advantages. And also that we can, in the previous lecture, I gave the example of voting being recorded and monitored using a blockchain. So imagine the advantage there. The recording of voting can be controlled by a centralized agency like Election Commission. But at any point, we can always go and say whether our vote has been recorded and our vote has been recorded for the right parties. This is something that which may be practically impossible to implement in the real life. We do, if necessary, we can go to the courts and find out such information. But imagine how much time and effort that it takes. With a blockchain, we can make such transactions almost instantaneous and at very little cost. So we can make such confidential information shared safely with the public. Safely means each one of us are able to see our votes, but we cannot go and see what somebody else has voted for. So that information can be shared with me very safely at very low cost using blockchain. Things like this has never been done in the past. Now today, if somebody gives me a document saying that this is the plot of land I own, I actually have to go to the registrar's office. They have to run through their records. Some of them are automated, some of them are not. So it may take quite some time and effort just to find out whether the documents that this person is presenting to me, which says that he owns a plot of land, is valid. In case of blockchain, a transaction like that can happen in seconds. If it is done correctly using a blockchain, I should be able to go to that blockchain and find out that this person does indeed own that plot of land. There are certain disadvantages. As of now, the existing blockchains performance number of transactions can handle is very low. The most popular popular blockchain, Bitcoin, roughly handles only about 25 transactions per second, because number of people dabbling in Bitcoin is not high. But imagine if you put voting on the blockchain, it should be capable of handling close to 1 billion users at a time, billion transactions per second, or some small period like that. So that is still an issue. Can we really extend blockchain to such vast transactions, like somebody going and verifying their Aadhaar number, somebody verifying their voting system? Each of these records have to handle about 1 to 1.5 billion records. Or even plain banking. Many banks have millions of customers. Let's say a bank has 10 million customers, and each customer has an average of 5 accounts. That alone means 50 million records. And even if a fraction of them are trying to do transactions in their account, the performance, how many transactions that a blockchain can handle, is still limited, and it's still open to question whether it can handle those numbers of transactions. And the second thing is, if there's a bug in the blockchain, fixing it is a big problem. Because if there's a bug, if there's a problem, because of the nature of the blockchain, it becomes obvious to everyone that there's a problem with this blockchain. There's a bug in the blockchain. Until that bug has been fixed and put back and implemented, that may take some time. In that time, we may not be able to stop the transactions on the blockchain. So there are ways to do it, but potentially it's possible that in any given blockchain, the information comes that somebody comes to know that there is a bug in the blockchain. Even after knowing that, we may not be able to stop transactions which happen after that. That's the way nature of the blockchain. Till a repair has been done to the blockchain itself, in the time in which that repair happens, transactions can keep going on when we fully know that there's a bug in the transaction. There's one example called DAO, which happened with a blockchain called Ethereum, where everybody knew there is a bug in the blockchain. It was still being exploited by the time the bug was fixed. So that's the inherent nature of the blockchain. And there are always issues of security, lack of control, regulations, ownership. As I mentioned, blockchains cannot be hacked easily. We cannot go back in time and change transactions. However, certain conditions are emerging in certain types of blockchains, where if somebody controls 51% of the power, they can actually do that. It was simply unimaginable when people started on blockchains, but now it appears that under certain conditions, which may not happen so easily, but when it does, security becomes an issue. Blockchain can be hacked. Blockchain can be controlled by one person, not by consensus. And last, assets lost cannot be recovered. In blockchain, assets are all digital assets. For example, take Bitcoin. Bitcoin is run on a blockchain. Bitcoin is nothing but a digital asset, a bunch of numbers. If by mistake I lose the set of numbers, I don't make a copy, I have bought one Bitcoin paying $8,000 or whatever it is, all I get is a digital asset, a set of gibberish looking numbers. If I don't make a copy and lose it, there is no way I can recover that. If I tear a currency note, I can take it to the bank. If I soil a currency note, the vendor may not accept it, but I can take it to the bank, give it to them, and get a recovery, get another replacement. In the case of blockchain, if I lose my asset, like a digital currency, it's permanently lost. We cannot recover. These are some of the disadvantages of the blockchain. So as exciting and as interesting as blockchain looks, there are still advantages and disadvantages, and one should be mindful that if we do a blockchain, these might be its disadvantages, and how do we protect it against potential attacks, losses, and various other negative consequences of using a blockchain. And on top of it, performance is still to be seen in terms of how it can handle literally millions and billions of records. So, having looked at blockchain and its advantages and its power, where can the blockchain be applied? The easiest answer one can give is any business where we need tamper-proof verification is the foundation. I have been mentioning that today business can happen between any two parties anywhere in the world because of the various trust mechanisms, third party. So every business requires trust. That if somebody promises me some currency or some money, unless the actually money lands in my account, I may not be able to, I may not be willing to do, but we do. We do ship the item without money being deposited to our account because we trust the other party, with the trust being guaranteed by a third party. So pretty much any business requires tamper-proof verification. So blockchain can find its uses pretty much anywhere. And second, where we need automatic enforcement. The moment, essentially all businesses are contracts. When I go to a vendor and say, I want to buy this vegetable, I'll give you 100 rupees. That's a contract. If he gives me the vegetable, I have to give him the 100 rupees. So a contract has to be enforced. So blockchains can enforce the contracts automatically. That is, if certain conditions mentioned in that transaction are confirmed, then blockchain can automatically enforce the terms of the contract. And these are some of the examples. Cryptocurrencies. Most of you must have heard of something like Bitcoin. Many of you may have heard of something like Ethereum. Bitcoin itself has Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Gold. Then there is Ripple. So many new cryptocurrencies are coming. I will cover this in another lecture later because they are playing an increasing role in business and commerce across the world today. They have certain strengths, they have certain weaknesses, and certain level of acceptability. So it can be a topic for a lecture by itself. But most cryptocurrencies as their foundation have a blockchain. Cryptocurrencies are currencies which are not controlled by a central bank like Reserve Bank of India. And that's how they use blockchain for their verification and trust mechanism. In fact, blockchain came into existence because of a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is an example of a cryptocurrency, and the first successful implementation of blockchain happened because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin came into the public vogue, and it was built on top of a blockchain. Blockchains can also be used as an escrow for financial transactions. That is, again, I sign a contract, me giving 100 rupees to a vegetable seller. We are face to face, so I can actually show him the 100 rupee note. What if I place an order for a pizza shop in the city where I don't know how to show them the currency note? Then we need to put that money in an account. It's called an escrow. And when he delivers the pizza to me, that 100 rupees the third party will take it and give it to them. Most of things like letters of credit in import and export. In such cases, money is put on an export in an escrow account. I sign a contract to import certain items. The exporter would want to see me having the money. So I take some amount of money required for the transaction, put it in a common account that neither of us control. It's controlled by a third party bank, which issues him a letter saying that I have received so much currency from party A, send the item. Once the item reaches me, I tell the bank, release the money to him, and the money gets released to the seller. Such accounts are called escrow accounts. Blockchains can act as escrow for financial transactions. Blockchains can provide escrow. They can be used for maintaining documents. So that anybody, I've been referring to maintaining land records. That's in fact one of the key applications of blockchain. We can put land ownership records of all plots in a city. Anyone who wants can go and find out to whom that plot of land belongs to. It can be used for verification of those documents, notarization, all these activities where humans are involved, which today take a lot of time and money, can be made automatic and foolproof. It's been used in supply chain management, endless list of. It's been used for voting management, an example which I gave in my previous lecture. So, what blockchain does in any business where there's a trusted intermediary, which often turns out to be expensive, it can be replaced in a person-to-person contact. People can deal with any other person across the world without an intermediary if we put all those transactions on a blockchain. So, number of applications is quite endless, literally. And on top of it, it's not just that blockchain can affect transactions as they're happening now. It's all the transactions in the business world today can be put on blockchain, but it can also bring new models of business. Whenever the way we do business changes dramatically, we say that the technology or whatever causes that change is a disruptive technology. It happened to phone lines. We were all on landlines. We had all these telephone booths saying STD, ISD, STD local. So to make a telephone call, we had to go there. We could not be reached. So one easy way to avoid a phone call when somebody calls our office is to instruct the person sitting next, tell him that he's outside. So, but when mobile phones came, they disrupted the entire landline business, the telephone business. Now we no longer need to be tied to a location. To make a phone call, we don't have to be next to a phone. Wherever we are, the phone call reaches us. We can reach anybody wherever we are, wherever they are. So this mobile phone business can be called a disruptive technology. It has disrupted the way we make telephone calls. It has disrupted the way we share information, contact people. It has disrupted the way we entertain ourselves. Now when we are waiting in a line, we no longer have to have a bored look. Thanks to our mobile technology, we can play a game, we can read the news, we can watch movies. So this mobile technology has disrupted the existing models. So those companies which are providing telephone instruments for a landline and those companies which are providing landline service, many of them have gone out of business. And new companies have come which provide mobile services. So any such technology which dramatically changes the way we do business is called a disruptive technology. And blockchain is one such technology. Blockchain is a disruptive technology. Let's take one example to show how it can disrupt the business as we know it today. The example I have taken here is of a credit card business. It's becoming, debit card also works exactly the same way. And this is the way it works. And credit cards can be, they offer convenience, they offer safety. You don't have to carry money. And most credit cards are today international credit cards. I can take my credit card, buy something in the United States, and pay in rupees using that credit card. The merchant out there gets paid in dollars. I come back to India and pay for my credit card bills using rupees. So they provide convenience, they provide safety and various other features, but they're also expensive. As I have been mentioning, charges for using a credit card can be as high as 2%. In some cases, maybe 5% of the transaction. We don't feel it because merchants absorb the cost. They take the 2% cost. They charge us, of course, later, but up to 2% or even more might be charged per transaction. Every time we use a credit card, there's a 2% cost to add it to that. Which, as I have mentioned, if you buy big ticket items, like if I buy a car worth 50 lakhs, the cost of using the credit card for buying a car worth 50 lakhs is 1 lakh, a significant amount. And let's see how blockchain can disrupt that. This is the way a regular transaction happens. The cardholder, customer, I go to a place, like a petrol bunk, for example. I go to the petrol bank, fill petrol, and give my credit card to the merchant, the person sitting there. He swipes the card. As we have seen, when I go to a petrol bank, give my credit card, I present the card, he swipes the card. That card details go to the bank, the petrol owner's bank. It could be IDBI Bank or Canara Bank. Whereas my credit card might have been issued by HDFC Bank. So this is Canara Bank, this is HDFC Bank. When he swipes, the detail goes to his bank, Canara Bank. Canara Bank, if it is a Visa, it contacts Visa company. If it's a MasterCard, it contacts MasterCard company. The MasterCard company goes to my bank, that is HDFC Bank, and finds out and checks, is it a valid credit card? And does this person have the balance? Does he have the balance, credit balance to charge cost of it of 2,000 rupees? The bank validates and says, yes, it's a valid card, and this customer does have the credit, is within the credit limit. It goes to Visa or MasterCard, and that authorizes Canara Bank, my bank, to say accept the credit card, which in turn authorizes the petrol bank. So that completes the authorization process, and now the owner of the petrol bank is guaranteed that he can accept my credit card, and if he does fill petrol, he will get paid. Then they will return the credit card to me, and I will fill up the gas. But if I already filled up the petrol, they authorize, print the bill at this point. If it is not authorized, they will have to pay in some other means. This is the way it happens. It's called the authorization process. When we are at the site doing the transaction, this is how the authorization happens, and the merchant gets guarantee that the piece of plastic I am presenting is a valid piece of plastic, which guarantees that he will get paid for the service or the item he is providing. And on the once a month, we will not go much into the clearance and settlement process. Once a month, what happens is the merchant's bank, Canara Bank, in this case, it'll bunch all the transactions. They actually do it on a daily basis. Every day they pay him. They pay him for the transactions of the day. And once a month, they bunch all the transactions, send it to Visa or MasterCard. Visa and MasterCard sends that transaction to my bank, HDFC Bank. HDFC Bank sends me a bill. Once a month, it sends me a statement saying that these are things you have charged, you have to pay so much, and they collect money from me. In between, they transfer the money through Visa to the merchant's bank, Canara Bank. That is how the clearance or settlement process happens. As you can see, there are a lot of intermediaries here. Other than these two banks, there is this party also. Other than this, there is the merchant, I am, and we have two layers of intermediaries other than the merchant. So let's see what a blockchain can do. We can replace the entire credit card company, Visa and MasterCard, with a blockchain. Now, when I give a piece of credit card, let's say my Canara Bank and HDFC Bank can set up a blockchain amongst themselves. So all the transactions, all the credit cards that HDFC Bank has issued is written into this blockchain. All the credit limits are written into the blockchain. As and when I charge my credit card, gets written into the blockchain. So whenever I give my credit card to the merchant can go to Canara Bank, and the Canara Bank can simply go to the blockchain. You know that things cannot be changed, things cannot be tampered. So with full trust, Canara Bank can go to the blockchain set up between it and HDFC Bank or a group of banks and find out whether I do have that credit card. Is it a valid credit card? I do have the credit limit. Based on that, it can authorize. Likewise, generating statements. Again, HDFC Bank doesn't have to contact Canara Bank or Visa. It can look at the blockchain once a month. It can take all my transactions that I have done, bunch them together and send me a bill. So this is a much lower cost option. So it can reduce that 2%, make the process much faster. So now with a blockchain done correctly and an agreement signed between banks themselves, the way we use a credit card has been completely changed. Now companies like Visa and MasterCard are under threat. They are no longer needed. So that is what is disruption. Today they are very profitable companies, all credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, JCB, Diners, even some of the banks which issue RuPay, it's a much lower option. All of them are highly profitable. Their entire business gets upended. So this kind of change blockchain is capable of bringing to any line of business. So it's a big disruptive technology. It changes the way, in this case, we don't see how the business is done. It's done in the background. There are cases when it is done in front of us, like Paytm, for example. So in such cases, blockchains can simply change the way we are doing business. That's one way. That's why we refer to blockchain as a disruptive technology. It can disrupt businesses as we know it. And it's a new business model now. We don't need a third party. Any two banks, any bunch of banks can set up a blockchain amongst themselves and run it. So I have given the example of two banks instead of Canara Bank and HDFC Bank. I have given an example of an international transaction involving locally a small bank like Karnataka Bank interacting with another small bank in the US called a Dime Bank. So again, two small banks without an international footprint can still do business by setting up a blockchain without depending on these third parties. That's why blockchain is a disruptive technology. And the next point I want to talk about is this thing called a smart contract and how that makes blockchain really powerful. Till now, from whatever I have described, all the transactions I've been referring to transactions, I'm referring to digital assets. They're all digital, they're all in digital form. If I sign a contract, if I place an order to buy pizza, the blockchain cannot guarantee that pizza is delivered to me. It can record the transaction, but it cannot guarantee that pizza is delivered to me and it can transfer the asset because the asset I have is a digital asset, a cryptocurrency or a account balance or what have you. The way to link it to real world to make sure that a contract is properly ensured is by something called a smart contracts. Smart contracts are a topic by themselves, but that's what makes blockchain an important thing. It's called a killer app. That's what has made blockchain such a powerful force. So let's look at what smart contracts are. Most of the blockchains today enable us to set up smart contracts. The earliest blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, didn't do smart contracts. Subsequent blockchains all help us do smart contracts, and these are what bring the real power to the blockchain technology. So what are smart contracts? They are a bunch of contracts, they have set of conditions encoded. It says do ABCDE if XYZ conditions are met. If condition X is met, condition Y is met, condition Z is met, do ABCDE, deduct X amount of money from A's account, deposit X amount of money in B's account, record the transaction. So a bunch of activities can be done based on some bunch of conditions being met, and it works both ways. Till the conditions are not met, the transactions will not be done. The moment conditions are met, transactions will be done. It will not be reversed or erased. So they fire automatically. You don't have to wait for somebody to approve once the smart contract is set. So they fire automatically when preset conditions are met. And smart contracts are the ones which link blockchain e-transactions to the real world. They are the connections between the two. And thus they extend the power of blockchain. Let's take an example. Very simple example of placing an order for a pizza and paying using a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin on the blockchain. So this is how it works. Here is me and here is the pizza shop. And I'm willing to pay a lot of money, 0.01, 1/100th of a Bitcoin. So how do? We set up we go to the blockchain, whichever is between us, and set up a smart contract where I place an order on the smart contract. That means it records my order. I have placed an order for a medium vegetarian pizza, and I am transferring 0.01, 1/100th of a Bitcoin to an escrow account. That is, if I had 1 Bitcoin in my account, it becomes 0.99, and 0.01 of the Bitcoin is put on the smart card. It's stored here. And the pizza shop acknowledges the order. It's also recorded. I placed the order, they have acknowledged the order, and then, and only then, 1/100th of a Bitcoin is deducted from my account, put in a neutral account. Step 2, this happens physically. The pizza shop sends the delivery boy, sends the pizza to my home, and I sign on the tablet. I sign on the tablet, which goes into the smart contract. The moment I sign, it doesn't go into the smart contract. The moment I sign on the tablet, I acknowledge it in some way. I press my finger biometric on the app that's on my pizza app on my mobile or some form. It acts as a delivery acknowledgement. The moment I have received the pizza, I won't acknowledge the delivery till I have physically received it. The moment I have done it, it goes into a transaction. It says the order has been delivered. You have the proof, and this 1/100th of a Bitcoin is transferred to the account of the pizza shop. That is, if the pizza shop had 1 Bitcoin, now it has 1.01 Bitcoin. I have 0.99 Bitcoin in my account. The physical transaction is complete. The order is complete. At any point in the future, if they have a dispute, if I have a dispute, anyone can go to the blockchain and check how the transaction went. Did the money really get transferred? So that is the power of a smart contract. Except for this one physical step, everything is done on the blockchain in the cyber world. All the transactions, all the transfer of money, the assets transfer, the Bitcoin is the digital asset. Everything is happening in the electronic world. So a smart contract also links the electronic world to the real world. The smart contract will not fire unless they send a pizza, I receive the pizza and I acknowledge it. So that's the power of smart contract. So now you can see that any business transaction can be put on the blockchain by writing a smart contract and putting the right conditions on it. In fact, one of the common ways of raising money is called crowdfunding, and crowdfunding can be done very well using a blockchain and a smart contract. We will see that example in one of the later lectures. Here is an example of another application of a blockchain, a cryptocurrency. The most common one is Bitcoin. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, Bitcoin is the first successful example of a blockchain. So a successful implementation. So it's the most prevalent cryptocurrency, very highly valued, much in news. But there are other currencies which are linked to the Bitcoin. They say our value is 1/100th of a Bitcoin. So there are not only Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, there are other cryptocurrencies which are piggybacked on the value of a Bitcoin. So popular it is. It is very well accepted. A lot of merchants across the world accept Bitcoin like any other currency, and it supports micropayment. A Bitcoin can be divided into 1 millionth part. Remember, a rupee can be divided into 100 parts, 1 paisa. That's the lowest, theoretically. A dollar can be divided into 100 cents. A Bitcoin can be divided to 1 millionth part of it. In the previous example I gave the example of 100.01. That itself is the limit for most currencies, but Bitcoin can go up to 1 millionth. It can support micropayments. It's another concept we'll see later. So very small payments also can be done using Bitcoins. A Bitcoin is based on a public permissionless blockchain. It's a public blockchain, no permission required. Anyone can download Bitcoin. It uses proof of work scheme of incentives. That is, why does it give incentives? For people to collect transactions, verify transactions, build the blockchain, maintain the blockchain, store the blockchain. So whenever any of us can do, it's a public permissionless, all of us can download the Bitcoin software and the database. We can collect all the transactions, will come to us. The moment we do that, all the transactions come to us. We can put them all in the block, encrypt them, send them for acceptance to Bitcoin chain. If it gets accepted, we'll get rewards in the form of Bitcoins themselves. This process of collecting transactions and putting them on the chain is called mining, and it uses what is called a proof of work. We have to prove that we have done the work of mining. The moment we do successfully, we'll get rewarded in terms of Bitcoins. So the blockchain is built by miners who solve a mathematical computation intensive algorithm. So it's not easy to mine a block. It takes a lot of computing power, but the rewards are rich enough that a lot of people are doing this professionally. Verification is done by consensus. When I record an order for pizza, is it a valid order? That is verified by all other participants on the Bitcoin blockchain. I go to Bitcoin and say I want to transfer 0.101 Bitcoin to the pizza shop. With the other participants in the blockchain, verify that I do have that amount of Bitcoin in my account, and that will be transferred to the pizza shop which sends me the pizza. Bitcoin, one characteristic is there can be only a total of 21 million Bitcoins. There are already about 15 million Bitcoins issued to miners and various people. So after another 6 million Bitcoins are issued into the Bitcoin world, there will be no more Bitcoins. At most, there will be a top level of 21 million Bitcoins. This is different from the real world. In the real world, whenever there is money supply running short, the bank, controlling banks like Reserve Bank or Federal Reserve, they constantly keep printing new and new currency notes to account for growing economy. Bitcoin is not like that. There's going to be a total number of Bitcoins. There are two varieties. Bitcoin has split into Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Cash. Both are operating. So there is no one single Bitcoin. There are actually two Bitcoins today, two types of Bitcoins, Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Cash. And many countries, many banks, many central banks don't accept Bitcoin because it's not supervised by anybody. It's not under anyone's control. It's a public currency. Everybody controls that. So it's being suspected of use for all kinds of illegal activities. So many banks don't accept Bitcoin as a currency. So this is one interesting example, most common example of a blockchain. That's the reason why I have included it here. And we will see more examples in later classes, but this is a major class of applications of blockchains. So one key applications of blockchains are in this key field called cryptocurrencies. And one more aspect I briefly wanted to cover is how do we go about building a blockchain? Of course, one can start from the basics of programming and put all the implementations. It's like starting to build a car, starting from nuts and bolts, or starting to build a computer, from starting to making the computer chip. It's practically not an option today. How do we build a car? We get parts. We buy engine from somebody, transmission somebody. Yes, we can build a car actually. There are parts available in the market. We can buy an engine, we can buy a transmission, we can buy seats, we can buy body panels, and we can put together a car. Or somebody can build a computer. We can buy the motherboard, we can buy the memory, we can buy the hard disk, we can buy the power supply, the display. All the components are there, so we can get all the components and put together a computer. Which computer we put together depends on which laptop and which motherboard we use. Which car we put together depends on which engine we buy. So likewise, there are tools to build Bitcoins, blockchains. There are tools which will help us build blockchains. They help us do the transactions. They help us do the encryption. They help us build the smart contracts. They help us put the terms and conditions. They help us various incentive schemes like proof of work, proof of stake. They help us decide what kind of blockchain it is. Is it going to be a public blockchain? Is it going to be a permission blockchain? Is it going to be a private blockchain? And is it going to be a permissionless blockchain? One such set of tools is what is called Hyperledger. It's actually a bunch of tools sponsored by the Linux Foundation. Linux is the very common free operating system that all of you know, and there's a foundation which maintains Linux. They also have sponsored a set of tools which will help us in developing blockchains. So these tools are publicly available. Linux Foundation is developing with the participation of a lot of industry participants like Microsoft, IBM, various other organizations. With their help, it's building a set of tools which are going to be publicly available, open source blockchain platform. So any one of us can download these tools and build our own blockchain. As I mentioned, major technology and finance companies are part of this foundation, developing the Hyperledger. I mentioned Microsoft, I mentioned IBM, there is Oracle, there is JP Morgan Chase, Visa, MasterCard, a lot of financial and technology players, Deutsche Bank, they all have joined together to develop these tools using which we can develop our own blockchains. It has already set a release. They have constantly been releasing, this information is about 2 years old, they are constantly releasing new and new tools to develop and implement blockchains. They have various tools called Hyperledger Burrow, Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Iroha for mobile development. We can develop blockchains to run on mobiles. There's a tool specifically called Hyperledger Iroha meant to develop blockchain applications on mobile tools. And they have tools for deployment called Hyperledger Cello, Hyperledger Explorer for various kind of analytics. What these tools are, how they go about doing this, how do they look, these are all fairly detailed topics, not suitable for a lecture like this. My idea in mentioning is for all of you to know, there are tools available for free, which will help us develop a blockchain. We don't have to start from nuts and bolts. There are tools available, we can put together a blockchain solution. And to give some essence of what else is happening in the blockchain world, this map, it's about 3 years old, shows where are these blockchains being developed. There are startups, startups are the companies typically, they start with these new technologies. Wherever you see the blue color, blockchain startups are there in those countries. In every country where there is a blue shading, new and new startups are coming up, which are developing new and new applications for blockchain. Cryptocurrency is only one of them. There is for supply chain management, logistics management, voting, banking applications, money transfer, public health, land records. There are companies coming up for practically they're using blockchain for any business or organizational application. And deeper the color, more startups are there. As you can see, United States of America had the maximum number of startups, but there also are big numbers of startups in Canada, in India, in China, in Australia, in Britain, Norway, Sweden, France. There are blockchain startup applications even in countries like Kenya, South Africa. Many countries in Africa also are getting in on the game. They're also trying to develop new and new applications in the blockchain world. In short, the applicability of blockchain is coming up pretty much everywhere in the world. And these are the sectors where it is being applied. There are blockchain applications coming up in finance and insurance, in information and communication, professional services, legal services and things like that. They are being used for arts, entertainment and recreation, public services like putting land records, media industry, retail industry, venture capital, energy trading is another key activity in which blockchains are being used. Real estate, education, healthcare, transportation and storage, you name the business. They are being used for monitoring public health. For example, even it's a pandemic like Corona that's going on right now, details of that can be safely put on a blockchain. In short, there is no new applications springing up in every field, in every country, every corner of the world. And this is a brief idea to show how much venture capital money is coming to blockchain. So with that, we come to the second lecture on the blockchains in the information system series. In the first lecture, we saw the basics of blockchain. In the second, we looked at some of the advanced concepts. This is lecture number 8, broadcast on channel 16 as part of Swayamprabha. So that was my intention in this lecture, that we look at some of the blockchain is a technological construct, it's a technology tool. There are various other concepts associated with that and various sub tools which make blockchain what it is. A very promising tool which threatens to be a disruptive technology, in a disruptive force in pretty much every aspect of business, in the way we do businesses across the world, with many significant advantages that will bring. It will make the transactions faster, more transparent, safer, less costly, and accessible to everyone. Certain activities which we could not have thought we could do it easily, like make public records available to, voting records available to all the voters, today can be done safely using blockchain, something we could not have imagined. So hopefully in the sum of a couple of future lectures, these are just two lectures about blockchain, one on the basics and one on to advanced concepts. In a few subsequent lectures, we will look at certain common applications, certain examples which will show the power of blockchain and certain ways in which disrupting business itself in the form of cryptocurrencies. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.